The understanding of a diabetic human body is changing at a rapid pace, all thanks to a set of scientists thinking outside that box. They are on the forefront of research when it comes to modern diseases and its relationship to our evolution. Today, because of their research, you will undoubtedly be able to answer some critical questions which will impact your future health. How often can diabetics eat fruit? Which kinds of fruit are better than others? And most importantly, how much fruit is safe to eat? But before we begin, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that gray notification bell. That way, you will be alerted when new life-changing episodes have been published. And most importantly, if you've learned something new or revolutionary today, and that is what this channel is all about, keeping you on the forefront of science, then please smash that like button for me. I will start with this simple truth. We humans have been evolutionary designed or hardwired by nature for our bodies to get fat for survival purposes. We think of insulin resistance, and specifically type 2 diabetes, as a disease. The truth is, this metabolic adaptation has made it possible for our species to exist and flourish through times of extreme stress. Think about it this way. During the last 450 million years, there have been at least 5 mass extinctions due to a variety of causes, including changes in atmospheric gases, changes in global temperatures, volcanic activity, and an asteroid impact. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors over the last few 100,000 years have been programmed for one thing: food scarcity. We, even today, are constantly alert, looking for food. This key survival instinct makes us look for foods that are, you guessed it, sweet, whether in nature, in our pantries, or on the grocery shelves. We have historically been designed to forage and search for fruit supplies. Then, when it is found, we wait for the fruit to ripen, become sweet, where the sugars change, and then we gorge ourselves. Why, you may ask? We need the sugars, or the fructose specifically, to be metabolized into fat for the changing weather conditions ahead. That is when food becomes scarce and is too physically demanding to obtain. In other words, the fructose metabolism pathway makes us not only hungry, but to want to eat substantially more food in a shorter period of time. This mechanism allows the body to take in vast quantities while it's still seasonally available. That fructose, in turn, gets stored as fat for the harsh weather changes ahead. The key breakthrough in understanding how our bodies work is to look at other animals in the wild. The most important means for survival is to have sufficient food and water, along with the necessary minerals, electrolytes, and nutrients to maintain muscle mass and body functions. For animals, one means for doing this is to store caches of food inside the den, but there's always that danger of that cache being stolen by other predators. So, the ideal means for assuring survival was for the body itself to aid in the storage of food, water, and other critical needs. Metabolic syndrome, such as insulin resistance, diabetes, high blood pressure, and high circulating triglycerides in the blood, are actually linked to our survival. We would have become extinct without it. For example, hibernating animals also develop metabolic syndrome in order to survive the winter. This physiological change helps animals like bears restore their needed fat reserves. The fructose in ripe fruits allow the bear to remain hungry and then take in vast quantities in a short period of time. In order to survive, they need to gain between 8 to 10 pounds a day. While they're hibernating, they're burning the fat reserves to produce calories while they sleep through approximately 5 months of winter. But here's the second part of the equation. When they're burning their fat, they're also producing, guess what? Their needed water, which helps keep them hydrated. There is a third survival benefit to becoming insulin resistant for both us humans during times of starvation and animals going into hibernation. During starvation, glucose as a fuel will be limited. Insulin resistance helps decrease the amount of glucose into demanding tissues such as skeletal muscle. This results in maintaining or even increasing blood glucose, reserving it for the brain. When you're starving, you have to have a functional brain because you still have to go out there. You've got to find food and you've got to be able to get back safely. You've got to remain alert and you have to be thinking to stay alive. According to our experts, obesity and diabetes exploded because the world became affluent. We have more than enough food readily available. So we're not controlling our appetites. We're eating more than we should, and we're not exercising enough. You will soon understand why this assumption is dead wrong. The big change. Very few scientists understand the biological switch that gets turned on and makes your body gain weight. Once this trigger's been set off, there is absolutely nothing you can do about it. We know that it's used in the wild as a survival mechanism for many animals, so they know it exists and they have proven it. In this critical episode, you will also be the very first to know the key that turns off that switch. What you need to understand, animals normally regulate their weight very tightly. If you took animals or laboratory rats and you fasted them, and then you stopped the fast, they would go right back to the weight they should be. If you force-fed animals to gain weight, when you stopped it, they would go right back to their normal weight. This is, however, with standard chow. The exception, like we discussed, hibernating animals, they will maintain a completely normal weight during the summer, and then suddenly in the fall, they will start eating more. They will eat 2 to 3 times what they would normally eat to begin buffering themselves. These hibernating animals are not just storing fat in their fat reserves. They are putting fat in their livers. They're getting fatty liver. They, just like us humans, are also getting an increase of fats in the blood, namely triglycerides. And what is that first trigger we as humans and animals all share? It's a common survival pathway mediated by the simple sugar fructose. I don't want to get all sciencey here, but basically fructose shifts the energy provided in the nutrients we eat towards the storage of fat and away from immediate ATP production by downregulating mitochondrial metabolism for favoring of glycolysis. Fruits contain the simple sugar fructose and glucose. The ratio depends on not only the fruit, but the ripeness of the fruit. Fructose, however, is also present in regular old table sugar. Table sugar, or sucrose, it's what's known as a disaccharide. Di meaning 2 sugars linked together, 1 fructose molecule and 1 glucose molecule bound together. So table sugar is a 50-50 ratio. What would happen if scientists fed that animals table sugar or fruit or even soda for that matter? Because again, they are all virtually identical. Simple. They would initially eat less of other foods. But after a few weeks, guess what would suddenly happen? They would lose control of their appetite and they would start eating more and more, and they would get very fat. They developed insulin resistance, including all the features of that biological switch. They then asked the next critical question. Were these animals simply getting fat because they were eating too many calories? Or could you get fat by just eating sugar without eating more calories? Studies were then done to control how much the animals ate. It's called pair feeding. The breakthrough: when you feed animals fructose, even if you controlled for calorie intake, they would still get fatty liver, become insulin resistant. They would get high triglycerides in their blood, along with higher blood pressure. This switch is very, very powerful, but obviously, if it's activated chronically and you keep storing fat, you become progressively more and more insulin resistant. Then it's no longer something that helps you survive. It will kill you. As they say, the dose makes the poison. Our bodies do in fact try to protect us from turning on that switch. When you eat 3 to 4 grams of fructose, the intestines will actually neutralize it, and the fructose will generally not get to the liver. It is blocked by what's known as the intestinal shield. The other thing that blocks it is fiber. The fiber in fruit slows down that absorption, and it turns out the liver responds to the concentration of fructose, not the amount. Some very interesting historical thoughts I want you to consider. The discovery of sugarcane in India, specifically the Ganges River, in around 500 BC, led to that sweetener we all know, table sugar. It changed mankind for good. The fructose in table sugar can now be consumed year-round. In around 1907, a British physician named Dr. Charles was stationed in India. He made the alarming observation that type 2 diabetes was increasing rapidly among the wealthy Bengali Indians living in Calcutta. He also noted it was non-existent amongst the poor Punjabis. What was his hypothesis? The table sugar or sucrose from sugarcane production could only be afforded by the wealthy. They and they alone were getting sick. At a symposium held later that year, other physicians from other tropical countries made the same stunning observation. 2 very important points I want to add. Today's modern fruits are genetically engineered to be bigger and substantially sweeter with more fructose than their previous counterparts, which means they also contain less fiber. Which fruit in particular has the most fructose? This should not be a surprise to you. It's mangoes. The average mango contains around 30 grams of fructose. A can of soda has approximately the same amount. What are the absolutely deadliest of foods? Hands down. Dried fruits and fruit juices. They contain the most amount of fructose and no fiber. And this is what we give to our children for breakfast every single morning. Fruit juices along with more table-laden wheat cereals. The experts in our nutritional field want to blame junk food and specifically sodas as the problem. But the sugar in soda, high fructose corn syrup, is the same thing as table sugar and virtually identical to the sugars in modern fruits. The newest JAMA Pediatrics just revealed this bombshell. Devastating news. Amongst youth aged 12 to 19 years old, approximately 1 in 5 already has prediabetes. I want you to wrap your head around this. 36% of the boys tested were diabetic, but they were of normal weight. They were not fat, but already had fatty liver and insulin resistance. This leads us to the first question of the day. Is it good to eat 1 or 2 fruits at a time? We have to first take a step back and ask ourselves, if diabetic already, or we want to prevent becoming an insulin-resistant diabetic, then we have to deal with not only the fructose, but the glucose in fruits too. Remember the old adage, an apple a day keeps the doctor away? Is that still true? Does Santa Claus exist? 1 medium apple has around 25 grams of total sugars, and 11 of those are fructose. The rest, 14 grams, it's mainly glucose. Remember I said the body can naturally protect us from around 3 to 4 grams of fructose? The 11 minus 3 to 4 in that apple has to be metabolized by the liver. The rest of the straight sugars from that apple, the glucose will require insulin as blood glucose will be affected. And this is the big, and I do mean big consequences of the sugar in that fruit. It will immediately drive up hunger. Fruit gives no feeling of fullness or satisfaction. Your body will want more carbohydrate-based foods soon after you've eaten that fruit. And we've talked about this in previous episodes. If one's diet is rich in carbohydrates because we have been instructed to eat 3 meals a day, which are already full of carbs, plus snacks, fruits, more carbs, then what is the body to do with all that extra energy coming in once subcutaneous fat stores are already full? This in turn puts a lot of pressure on the liver. The human body handles glucose and fructose in different ways through unique pathways. Virtually every cell in the human body can break down and use glucose for energy. Only a few cells can handle fructose, and unfortunately, the brunt of the workload falls on our livers. Depending on the dose again, give the liver enough fructose and tiny fat droplets begin to accumulate within the cells. This buildup is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease because it looks just like what happens to the livers of people who drink too much alcohol. We are seeing this in our children now, and I cannot ring that bell loud enough. Second, in that carbohydrate-rich environment, the liver has to convert all that excessive glucose from the fruits into fats, namely triglycerides, which then get exported and stored in between all the body organs and inside that muscle tissue. Why? Again, the body is full. It has nowhere else for it to go. Third, and this is what all the high carbohydrate proponents are missing when it comes to your long-term survival as a diabetic. Once that special fat becomes present within the liver, in between all the body organs known as visceral fat, and inside that muscle tissue, it works against insulin. These fats are actually what causes the insulin resistance. So your pancreas has to work harder and harder to keep producing more and more insulin to keep blood sugars controlled. Eventually, the beta cells within the pancreas burn out and begin dying. The body at this point can no longer keep blood sugars controlled. Based on the latest studies, once damaged, beta cell regenerative capacity is very limited in us humans. What are their imperative conclusions? Reducing the pancreas workload is the most effective way to preserve beta cell function known to date. What does that mean? Once diagnosed as a prediabetic or a diabetic, the pancreas can no longer withstand a high carbohydrate intake. And it does not matter the types of carbs. The more pressure you put on it, the faster it will die. The higher your blood sugars and A1C will become. I must repeat this. If one is not healthy and you already have all the features of metabolic syndrome, then any fruit in any serving size can potentially become your enemy. Ask yourself these 3 important questions. Will this fruit put any additional pressure on my pancreas, raising my blood sugars? 2, will this fruit cause more liver fat to be added, making more insulin resistance? Will this fruit make me hungry again, desiring more carbohydrates? The end result, especially for uncontrolled diabetics, first, extreme blood sugar swings, which leads you to feeling deprived and miserable for the rest of the day. It's no wonder it eventually leads to failure. You consequently beat yourself up for seemingly out of control junk food cravings, which again, it's not your fault. That switch has been turned on. And now to the most important part of this episode. How do we turn off that evolutionary switch so the body can start reversing all these damages and begin that repair process? This can only occur when 2 things happen. 1, by removing all those toxic embedded fats within the body. And 2, allowing the pancreas to rest. Simply put, it begins and ends with protein. One must increase their protein intake while simultaneously reducing carbs. Due to our evolution, the protein leverage hypothesis predicts we humans will always prioritize protein first when regulating our total food intake. In plain English, we are continually driven to consume more and more food until we meet our minimum protein or amino acid needs for the day. Why? The body needs this constant supply of those building blocks for complete repair and recovery. The real world implication is that if we don't consume adequate protein, we will overconsume other foods high in carbohydrates and or fats in a subconscious effort to obtain those critical missing amino acids. As protein gets more and more diluted by the carbohydrates in modern food supply, we must eat more carbohydrates to gain that limited protein. So you'll keep on eating and eating and eating. It's only when you get good, high quality protein eaten at every meal does that switch get turned off. This is where the body starts to reverse that imminent death spiral. Metabolic syndrome and obesity occurs when one is simply not eating enough protein. Always remember our rule as resilient diabetics. Let thy food be your medicine. Good food is medicine. Bad food will need you to take more and more medicine. I bet many of you have more additional questions like, how much protein does a diabetic need per day? What are the best kinds of protein? I will set up a playlist for you with the answers to these great questions. And I'll even expose more deceit and misunderstanding doctors and their nutritionalists are taught to this very day about this vital macronutrient. The first link you will see is to subscribe to this important channel. The second is the link to the playlist on proteins. Have a great and productive day, and we will see you soon with another new episode, which are generally released bi-monthly. Bye for now.